Today we're diving into a major decision by the Supreme Court that could have far-reaching effects on federal regulations, particularly Medicare. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what the Chevron doctrine is and why it's so important. Back in 1984, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision in the case of Chevron USA versus the Natural Resources Defense Council. This case set a two-step test for how courts should handle federal agency interpretations of ambiguous laws. The Chevron doctrine has two main steps. One is that if Congress has clearly spoken on an issue, that's the end of the matter. Two is that if a law is ambiguous, courts would defer to the agency's interpretation. Sometimes you hear this referred to as Chevron Deference. So what did the Supreme Court decide recently? Let's break it down. In a 6-3 decision, the majority opinion focused on limiting federal agencies' power to interpret ambiguous laws. They emphasized that it's the court's job to interpret laws, not unelected bureaucrats. The Supreme Court's legal reasoning was centered on reinforcing the separation of powers. Now that's kind of a big thing and more than a little refreshing. They believed that allowing agencies too much interpretive power shifts the balance away from Congress to unelected officials. Now, let's get into what it means for Medicare. This decision impacts agencies like the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, by restricting their ability to broadly interpret statutes. We'll probably see changes in how Medicare regulations are interpreted and enforced. The bottom line is that CMS, the federal agency that regulates Medicare, could face more scrutiny. Overturning Chevron deference marks a significant shift in legal precedents. Federal agencies like CMS will have less autonomy. In fact, the ink was barely dry on this decision when a federal judge in Fort Worth reached for it to curtail the scope of a recent CMS decision limiting compensation for field marketing organizations. The removal of Chevron deference means courts can more easily question federal agency decisions. I think we'll see a surge in legal challenges against Medicare regulations as courts refrain from deferring to the CMS interpretations. Different stakeholders will have varied views on this change. Healthcare providers might benefit from new avenues to challenge burdensome regulations. Beneficiaries could experience both positive and negative effects, depending on how the new regulations are handled. The Supreme Court decision is a two-edged sword. There are arguments for Chevron deference, that CMS brings expertise in Medicare regulation, and that having centralized interpretation for Medicare provided consistency and stability. But there was a major argument against Chevron deference, and that was that it had the effect of reduced judicial oversight and federal agency overreach. How the Supreme Court's ruling unfolds will certainly affect management of Medicare as a federal program. We'll be watching how this develops, and most importantly, what it means to you. Thanks for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think this ruling will affect Medicare? See you next time.